Hello, I'm Marc Elrich, at-large member of the Montgomery County Council, inviting you to join me for a conversation with Andrea Harrison of the Prince George's County Council. That's next, right here on CCM.
This No Boundaries travels to Tacoma Park and the very inviting Capital City Cheesecake Restaurant. Their downstairs lounge provided the perfect setting for a conversation between Montgomery County Councilmember Marc Elrich and Prince George's County Councilmember Andrea Harrison.
You and I are probably unusual in the DC area because we've been here all our lives.
Natives.
Yeah, I grew up in DC till I was 10 years old and then moved to Silver Spring and have been there or thereabouts pretty much ever since. And you?
Yeah, I grew up in Glenarden, and I live around the corner now. I'm 5 minutes from where I grew up. Yeah, same community basically.
Yeah, I grew up in Tacoma, DC. So
Okay.
the first 10 years. So like I'm literally just a couple miles from the house I grew up in.
Yeah.
So this is pretty familiar territory.
Yeah.
So you went to school where?
Well, I graduated from the Academy of Notre Dame on North Capitol and K Streets. It's no longer there. It's now all Gonzaga. It was a Gonzaga building.
I went to Whittier Elementary in DC till the middle of 5th grade, and then I moved out to Silver Spring, and I went to McKinney Hills Elementary School, and then Montgomery Hills Junior High School. McKinney Hills was closed for a while, now reopened. Montgomery Hills is now a private school, and then I went to Einstein High School. And then in the middle of the 60s, I went off to the University of Maryland,
Yeah.
which was an interesting place to be and an interesting time.
When I graduated high school, I originally went down to Roanoke, Virginia, and that didn't work out too well for me. I was incredibly homesick, quite honestly. And I came back and I went to Prince George's Community College. Went through about 3 different majors before I finally settled on one and finished. Got married, started a family, and then eventually went back to Bowie State. And I graduated from Bowie State with my degree in public policy.
So is that what got you into politics?
Well, so this is an interesting story. So my dad, James Fletcher, he was actually a council member for the seat that I hold. And one year when he was at the Maryland Municipal League conference, he had a heart attack and passed away. And during the time of the funeral and thereafter, I don't know, something just sparked. You know, even at the funeral, it was just like I was destined. I don't know how to explain it. The gentleman who was selected to complete his term, he had an assistant who was going out on medical leave for a while. So I went in and I helped him, and it just kind of happened, and I ended up working my way into a job. So I worked for the previous council member, David Harrington,
Right.
and he was selected by the governor to complete the term of Gwendolyn Britt, who passed away unexpectedly.
Right.
And I ran for his seat in a special election, and that brings us up to 2008, and I won that election. So I finished out that term, and I won, I guess you could say, my first full term in 2010, and we're coming to the end of that. And I can run one more time, and I plan to do that. So what about you? Now, you were a teacher.
I was a teacher.
Elementary school teacher.
I taught elementary. I mean, I come out of, like I said, I went to the University of Maryland, so I came out of activism from the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. When I went to Maryland, you know, it was the height of the Vietnam War. And Maryland was still basically a segregated campus. It was technically integrated, but for all practical purposes, segregated. None of the employers would rent to African Americans, none of would hire African Americans, and none of the landlords would rent to African Americans. So it's kind of a hard place to go. So I kind of cut my teeth there, and I moved out to Tacoma Park eventually and got active in community work here, doing a lot of work around tenant issues, and then I got involved with the co-op. And I started teaching out here. Teaching was like, I don't know, it's my 3rd job or something like that, or my 3rd profession. And I taught, I think it's 14 years as a 4th grade teacher, my last 3 years as a 5th grade teacher. And I really liked it. I taught at Rolling Terrace. It was a school that, you know, everybody would say has lots of challenges. But challenges are really rewarding. You actually feel like you're doing stuff. And while I was doing that, I was pretty active in the community. I got involved in the efforts to stop this mega mall in Silver Spring. They were trying to bring the equivalent of the Mall of America and plop it down in the middle of Silver Spring, and that would have made a disaster out of Silver Spring. So I worked with Silver Spring and Tacoma groups on that issue. I got elected to the City Council in Tacoma Park, where I served 10 terms, and I really liked that. But I think the pivotal thing for me before I even ran for office in Tacoma was going to a conference in Minneapolis, and we met a bunch of civic activists, and they were talking about not just about food co-ops, they were talking about political action in the state legislature, and they were saying how frustrated they were about getting involved in people's political campaigns and doing a lot of work and putting troops on the ground and helping people get elected, and then when the person would get elected and they just go and say, and so you are going to help us with our agenda, and they get the standard, well, I got a lot of competing interests, and yours is just one of many things I have to consider. And they were talking about how they had come to feel they felt the need to elect people who actually represented them and came out of them, rather than electing somebody who doesn't share those values or views and hoping for the best. And that's what inspired me to run for Tacoma Park. I was, as an activist, you get 3 minutes in front of a mic. You know that the odds of being listened to aren't really good. And then you feel good you said what you said, but at the end of the day, you don't win very much. And I felt like I'd like to be on the other side of the mic. I'd like to be listening to people. I'd like to be hearing people and trying to help them achieve, what they want to achieve with government. And that sort of re-altered my thinking. It got me into Tacoma, and eventually got me on the county council here. It took me 4 times. I lost 4 times before I won.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
But I was persistent. The 5th time was the charm this time.
Well, you were saying that you were a 4th grade teacher for 14 years, and as a parent, I appreciate that. When you teach 1 grade for that long, you know where the children should be at that point. You know where they should be in their development, where they should be in their personal development as well as their educational development. I remember my youngest son, when he went to the 2nd grade, the teacher who was there, she had taught 2nd grade for 17 years. And if she didn't know anything else, she knew how to teach 2nd grade, and she knew how to deal with it. My son's a little active, and she understood boys in the 2nd grade and how to teach them. And I really appreciated that. So I just want to say that I appreciate you for sticking in there that long with little people.
I like little people. And the thing about 4th and 5th grade is I really felt they were really pivotal years. Because if you don't leave elementary school well prepared, then you're going to bring those struggles into middle school.
Right.
And as an elementary school teacher, you're the last adult who has a kid all day long and can take the extra time and can adjust the schedule to try to help them meet their needs. But when you get to middle school, it's like you've got your 55 minutes, whatever it is, in the class. And when the class is over, and it's sayonara.
Right.
And good luck. And I thought it was really a pivotal point in kids' lives, and you could make a difference. And I thought, it might have some effect on the outcomes for kids.
Yeah.
I'm Sheriff Darren Popkin.
I'm Police Chief Tom Manger.
Together with our partner, Montgomery County Law Enforcement Chiefs,
We're urging you to drive phone-free.
Since 2010, it's been against the law to use a handheld cell phone while driving.
Previously, we had to witness another driving offense prior to a driver being pulled over.
Now, there's a new law in effect.
We'll be ticketing for the sole offense of using a handheld cell phone while driving.
One text or call can wreck it all.
It's Maryland law.
Hang up and drive.
As this No Boundaries continues from Capital City Cheesecake in Tacoma Park, Marc Elrich and Andrea Harrison share their thoughts about a recent success. In late November, their respective councils voted to raise the hourly minimum wage to $11.50 by 2017.
So Marc, were you surprised at the amount of attention that we have received around this discussion of minimum wage? with between the collaboration, the regional collaboration, and just the subject matter itself?
A little bit. I mean, I'm a member of COG, you're a member of COG. We talk a lot. We don't often do a lot together. And I guess I hadn't realized what a big deal it was for the three of us to come together on something this big and actually do something. I mean,
Yes.
Phil's not here, but this was a three-party arrangement.
Right.
We got together and said we want to make something happen, and we made it happen. I've never seen anything in COG where people said, well, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that, and we're going to make this happen. And I guess that's a big deal, but I hadn't thought about it as a big deal. I just thought about it as perfectly logical to take, this region and kind of insulate ourselves, and not make any one of us stand out. And it just seemed like the logical thing to do. I didn't realize it was supposedly such a profound thing to do.
Right. And I was very surprised at the amount of attention that we've received as well. No one is used to anyone working together in government. And so I think that was a very big surprise to particularly a lot of the media outlets.
And the other attention, I hadn't thought about that either because I was too much in the moment. I mean, and as you know, I was struggling to get votes up till the day that we actually voted. So I wasn't focused on what was happening externally, I was focused on what was happening internally. But afterwards, you kind of see that everybody's frustrated with the nature of the national government, which is dysfunctional. So if you're looking for the government to help, they're not going to do it. And I think there's a lot of frustration equally with state governments, which haven't really been leaders in this, with the odd exception of maybe New Jersey, Massachusetts, and California, and New York, I think. But there hasn't been any real leadership, and I think we touched the nerve. And I think what I've heard from people is that we can do this, and we don't need to wait for other people to do it. We
That's
can do
right.
it.
The big question was, are you concerned about businesses leaving and going to, Charles County or to Fairfax or Virginia? And my answer is no. I'm not concerned at all, because the businesses are going to go where, the bottom line is. And quite honestly, while we're talking about, the working poor here in our region, there's a lot of disposable income that is still here, and they're not going to leave that on the table. So no, I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah, I was not so terribly worried about the businesses in these sectors. It's mostly, fast food and hospitality.
And they're not going to go anywhere.
They're not going anywhere. And the market's here. I mean,
right.
If you want to open up a restaurant, you're opening it up because you can sell $50 bottles of wine around this place, not because you can find workers to work for $7.25. And so if we were a manufacturing place, if our base of jobs were different, I might feel differently. It would still be the right thing to do, but the economic argument might shift a little bit. I don't think there's much argument here. And we didn't hear much from many business people, because most people I talked to said, I don't pay my employees that little, because you can't get good employees as a rule.
Right. The bottom line is that people can't live off of $7.25 an hour.
Right.
And we have many people who are attempting to do that. Now, I'm going to exclude young people from this, because they're not the ones that we're trying to necessarily impact, but it's the adult, the working poor, that individual who may have lost their job because of this bad economic downturn that we've had for the past several years. They may not have been able to get back to where they were. They may not have been that high to start with. But the bottom line is that they still have to buy health insurance. They still have to put their children in child care. They still have to take care of their transportation needs to get to work. They still have to have some sort of housing. And everything is going up all around us except for their salaries. And the minimum wage, to me, is a small thing. It's not going to take anyone out of poverty. It certainly isn't. But it may help them to do just a little bit more. It may give them just a little bit more hope. It may help them to buy, a pair of shoes for their child before it gets too bad. You just don't know how it may impact an individual. The small piece, just to raise their salary just a little bit, so that they can help to make ends meet just a little better. And that's all that this was about.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty small. I mean, you could have justified 12, you could have justified 15, you could have justified 17. I mean, the living wage is about $14 and the sustainable wage is closer to 17. And we didn't go to either of those points.
Right.
I mean, anybody who thinks that, I mean, I've heard these comments about, you hear these people are going to be living really, really well and they're not even going to have to work hard. It's like $11.50 an hour, which you don't get till 4 years from now, you're not going to be living so well.
Right.
When I was looking at doing this, the first thing was I looked at what the state was going to do, and I didn't believe they were going to get to 10. But I had approached some people about whether they would be willing to introduce an element that would have a differential for high-cost areas rather than low-cost areas, because I think it made sense, may make good sense in Western Maryland. 10 would be okay, assuming you can get there. But 10 around here still doesn't cut it.
Right.
And these aren't kids going to work. I mean, all these kids, they don't need this money or it's a starter job. Go into these stores, it's not starter jobs. These people have been there a long time. And you've got the issue like we do with kids on free and reduced lunch. Their parents were all adults. They're long past the starting entry in the workforce. They've probably been in the workforce 6, 7, 8 years or more. They're still poor enough to qualify for free and reduced lunch.
Right.
And that's what compels me. And then I look at it as a legislator. I think about the cost to the government. I mean, basically, outside of police and fire, almost everything else we do is a social subsidy. All our housing programs, our health care programs, these are all subsidies we pay to people who normally, if they're middle class folks, would be buying these services and they can't buy them, and government steps in and tries to make them more affordable. So I look at it as, certain elements in the private sector have offloaded their costs. And they've taken them off themselves and they've put them on us. And I find that it's hard to run government, and of course they're the same people who come to us and say your taxes are too high and you have too many services, and I'm left with wondering, so you don't want to pay people well enough not to need services, and you want me to cut the services, so what on earth do you think is going to happen to these people? And they don't feel any obligation to make that connection. They can both oppose the wages and oppose the government, which tries to help people who don't earn wages, adequate wages.
Well, many people, majority of the people are blessed in some sort of way that they've not had to be touched with that infirmity. They've never had to decide on whether to pay for this or pay for that, whether to do this or to do that. For the most part, the majority of the people here are able to do everything that they want. Saturday, I was at one of our homeless shelters in Prince George's County for lunch with Santa with the children, and it's a women and children's shelter. And there was a woman who came over to me and said, "Councilmember Harrison, I need a job." She said, "I've been a secretary all my life." She said, "And I've done everything that I know to do. I even went to McDonald's and I haven't been able to find a job. And I don't know what her situation is. I don't know what led her there. I didn't ask any questions. It's not my business. But she is in a shelter, homeless shelter, and she's looking to fast food just to make it so that she can get out of the shelter and have some place to live. Is she really going to be able to do that on 725? And this woman looked like she should be thinking about her retirement income at this point and not trying to start over.
And this is real money. I mean, the first $1.15 that we raise, that's like, almost $50 a week, $200 a month for one person. If you were a 2-adult earner family with both adults working full time, that's $400 a month. That's real money put back into families, and where that's all going to get spent. If somebody in a neighborhood gets that kind of money, it's going right back into neighborhood stores. They're not going to buy a Matisse to hang on their wall, and they're not going to be taking a trip to Europe. They're going to be putting shoes on their kids' feet. They're going to be buying another bag of groceries. Somebody said to me, "Well, what's the difference? Why are you fussing over 75 cents? $10.75 versus $11.50." I said, $30 a week, one bag of groceries on the table. I taught school. I saw too many kids hungry, and it's a real thing. And $30 a week matters. 60 again if it's 2 adults. I said at the end of the day, the difference between $11.50 and $7.25, if this thing had stayed frozen for 4 years, is $680 a month. I said, just imagine how that money changes people's lives. And it's just hard. It's hard for me to not understand how other people don't get this. I just
Yeah.
like, we don't, maybe too many of us don't know what that means.
Right.
But, you know, for these folks, it means an awful, awful lot. And I think it changes dynamics. There's all this evidence on, you know, the social impacts of poverty, the educational impacts of poverty. We're not just changing a number. We may be changing a condition.
Right.
And that's the important thing about what we're trying to do.
And that's what we were elected to do, to help change folks' lives.
Last time I checked.
Hi, I'm Gail Street, and welcome to Paths to the Present.
When federal troops were dispatched to occupy strategic points in Maryland, many were sent to Montgomery County.
2 new counties were carved out of the existing Frederick County. Both were named for Revolutionary War heroes, Washington and Montgomery.
For this final segment of No Boundaries, from Capital City Cheesecake in Tacoma Park, Marc Elrich and Andrea Harrison discuss the ongoing challenges facing each of their counties.
Well, obviously our challenge is still budget. You know, since 2008 or so, budget has just been overwhelmingly challenging. We had to make some very difficult decisions with cuts. We had to furlough employees. We were probably the first in the region to furlough. And I didn't want the employees to have to deal with that by themselves. And so I gave back a portion of my salary during that time as well, because we're in this together. You know, everyone's got to take a hit. We've gotten past that, but we still have our challenges, and so I'm not sure what the budget's going to look like for next year, but I'm sure that it's going to, you know, they're going to come back and say, well, we have some challenges and we've got to make some decisions, and so we'll make those decisions when they come. But budget, you know, is right through here. It's still a difficult challenge because, you know, in Prince George's County, we are solely reliant on personal property taxes and income tax. That's all of our revenue right there. So that's a challenge.
You're pretty much in the same box we are. It's 2 revenue sources, trying to recover from the recession. Everything is still not 100% back the way it was before, and who knows when it's going to come 100% back. And we all had to make the same sacrifices. Our council took the same hit that everybody else did. So I guess budget going forward stays a challenge. Schools are a big issue. I mean, they consume half our budget. I'm sure they take
It's
a large
65%
portion.
of our budget.
And at the end of the day, the job with schools is not the percent of the budget. The job is educating the kids. And I would really like to get away from the discussions, I don't know if you have them over there, about how much the schools consume, and rather focus on, you know, what is the job of schools, and are we getting this job done? Do you guys get to say much about school policy, or are you off?
No, not really. Our job is really just to approve their budget. We don't have line item authority. And so we approve categories, and so if the school system decides to move money in between, then they can do that without our say. So we're hoping that we're, you know, moving in the right direction. Made some changes last year in the General Assembly that gave the county just a little bit more authority. But not being an educator, you know, it's probably a little bit more challenging for me to speak on those issues in particular. But as you said, the bottom line is educating the children, and that's all that matters, and helping to build character so that they can become productive members of society, and then one day take over when we're off playing golf and sipping wine in Tuscany on vacation. That they're running the government in an effective way.
I don't think my retirement's going to get me to Tuscany sipping wine.
That's a good thought.
Perhaps it's a wonderful thought. I guess transportation's another big issue for both of us.
Mm-hmm. You know, we have been focused on transit-oriented development. As you know, we don't have very much commercial development, and we've been working very hard to build our commercial tax base so that we can get more revenue, and quite honestly, keep some of our employees, some of our residents working in the county. 65% of our residents travel outside of the county daily to work. Some of them come to Montgomery County, some of them go to Virginia. Of course, you know, we have a large federal government group that goes to work in DC. So we've been working on that, and transportation is an issue. You know, the two of us, we're trying to work through this whole Purple Line bit so that we can get our residents back and forth. And, you know, there's some challenges around there. We've been talking with, Prince George's County has been talking with Charles County regarding bus rapid transit, and I think that the discussion is coming up between Prince George's and Montgomery as well. So, you know, we have to continue to work through that.
I think it's a big deal. I mean, transportation is, you know, key to getting people to and from work, and we've got population centers that are divorced from job centers. Since I grew up around here, I'm somewhat familiar with Prince George's County, and you have, you know, sort of the curse and the blessing of undeveloped metro sites inside the Beltway and at the edge of the Beltway, which is a good thing. And, you know, and it's bad because they're undeveloped, but it's good because you've got some prime opportunities to do things that are on top of heavy transit that you could actually feed people to from beyond.
We have the largest number of metro stations in the system, and most of which are either undeveloped or underdeveloped. So yes, it's a curse and a blessing. So we're working through that. We're hoping to be able to attract a few more employment opportunities in those transit areas, as well as some of the residential development, so that you do have true walkable communities, and that's what we're working towards.
I think when you have a relatively blank slate in some of these places, you can actually build truly walkable communities. You know, I think you have opportunities for both housing and commercial to cohabit side by side, and I think that, you know, really holds a lot of promise for you all in the future. You
know, we look to Bethesda and Silver Spring as goals for us, and you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. No. We just look for best practices and see how we can improve on that.
I think, you know, hopefully, out of what we managed to do on the minimum wage, we can have more discussions about how we cooperate, because I think, you know, education affects both of us. Transportation affects both of us. The adequacy of state funding to meet the capital projects that are both needed for schools and for transportation is critical to both of us.
Yes.
And you know, we drive a lot of the economic activity in the state between our two jurisdictions.
Yes.
We are not insignificant, and I feel pretty strongly that if we're going to be the economic driver, and if the state likes keeping so much of our money, then they have to, you know, enable us to fulfill that role. We can't do it well if we're hamstrung, and hopefully, you know, we'll be able to work to get more of the kind of, I think, capital needs met out of the state that we should get, along with some of the other human service needs, which I think have fallen on the state and they haven't always done a good job with. Mental health comes to mind.
Right.
But I look forward to it.
Well, you know, I certainly look forward to it as well. I believe that we have shown that it can be done. I think that we lead by example, and we lead on purpose. So we make our decisions and we do what we do on purpose.
Yeah, we showed it could be done. We showed it could be done easily.
Yes.
This was not pulling teeth. And I think that, you know, that should open some eyes that, you know, there really are conversations that can be had, and there are, you know, opportunities that we could take advantage of together. So
yeah,
I'm really glad we did what we did.
I am too.
And
I look forward to doing more.
So I want to thank you for coming out today.
I want to thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it, and I like this place. Small little community cafe, great coffee, great cheesecake, great conversation.
Well, enjoy the cheesecake. I think I'm off limits on that today. But thank you again.
Yes, thank you.